Gentlemen, the NBA season is upon us. We are in the middle of NBA preseason right now. We just had one of the craziest off seasons that I think we've seen in quite some time. But most importantly, it is that time of year to talk about what is about to transpire during the season. Now, I made a video where I had some bold predictions about some teams and players and things that I thought were going to go on. But I do think it's now that time of year where we should be predicting the NBA finals. And yes, it is way too early, but I really don't care. Now, I have thought about it, and in my opinion, there are 4 legitimate teams that I believe actually have a chance to win the NBA finals. Basically, I'm going to give my case for each one of these 4 teams, then at the end of the video, I'm going to be ranking who I think has the best chance to actually win it. Okay, so I think the first team we have to start off with is simply the Milwaukee Bucks. After trading for Damian Lillard and basically flipping him for Jrue Holiday, who is a consistent playoff dropper, and Grayson Allen, who is a solid role player, it does make sense to say that this team could be considered the favorites by most. Now, if you were to tell me that you thought Milwaukee was going to win the finals, I'm not gonna lie, I wouldn't disagree with you and I wouldn't fight you on it. I think they have as much of a chance as anybody. Now, usually the most obvious pick isn't the sexiest one, but I'm not gonna lie, the idea of Giannis winning another championship and Damian Lillard winning his first championship is something that I think we would all love to see. I'm not gonna lie, what the Bucks gave up and what they got back this offseason I think is unmatched compared to just about any other team. I like the starting lineup, I like the bench, and overall I think Milwaukee has a great squad that they've put out here. I will say I'm very interested to see the dynamic of Giannis and Dame as a pick and roll situation. I am also curious to see the times where Damian Lillard is just going to randomly go for 40 and Giannis doesn't need to do much, and vice versa. The Bucks just having to rely on Giannis were already a scary team, but now you add Damian Lillard, and let's also not forget like Chris Middleton isn't still a solid player. Also, we're not going to act like this man Chris Middleton wasn't injured for basically the entire year last year, and when he did come back in the playoffs, he looked pretty normal to me. Also, not to mention, I think this is pretty important, but he's bald, and everybody knows when a player goes bald, they basically get like +5 on every single attribute. All jokes aside, I am very excited to see how this Milwaukee team is going to play. Again, I'm also interested to see the dynamic. Is Giannis going to be the number one? Is Dame going to be the number one? I think Dame is the type of player to know in a winning situation, Giannis is probably going to have to be the main guy. However, of course, if it comes to a game-winning shot, I think the ball is going to be in Dame's hands, but I feel like we all know that. Overall, I'm just really excited to see this team play, man. I think it's only right we talk about Phoenix next because they had quite the intriguing offseason. First off, they got Bradley Beal for basically Chris Paul and Landry Shamet, a deal I think everybody can be happy about. Not to mention, one of the biggest problems with Phoenix is that they had a lot of depth issues. Well, Phoenix basically took care of that within like a couple weeks. And funny enough, even when I thought they had a perfectly fine depth, they decided to get involved in the Milwaukee trade for Dame, and they actually got some pretty solid pieces. Not to mention, they got rid of DeAndre Ayton and flipped him for Yusuf Nurkic. Now, I know what you're gonna say, oh, but Ayton is by far better than Nurkic, and on a skill level, he probably is. But the problem is that DeAndre didn't want to be there, and it just was not working out. Like, I'm not gonna lie, there is a chance that Ayton's stats are going to double this year. Okay, maybe not double, but he's gonna have a great season. I do believe that. However, it doesn't matter because he was never going to do that on Phoenix. I mean, from the reports I'm seeing, it seemed like nobody wanted him there. So honestly, why keep the guy and why not flip him for a solid center that is going to help out a lot on the offensive side? I will say my only issue with this team is probably the depth of the center position. I also do think the defense is going to be a little bit lacking. However, I do want to see what Frank Vogel is going to do. Frank Vogel is a very defensive minded coach, and I feel like some of our guys are going to be solid defensive players. Of course, I do want to wait until the season actually starts to see what is going to happen, but from what I'm seeing, it seems like Phoenix is simply just trying to outscore every single person they play, which in theory that might work. However, you still need to be good on the defensive side, and I'll always believe that defense wins championships. I don't want to have too many concerns just yet because again, I want to see what happens when the season actually does start. Like, even if Phoenix were to start like 15-5 or something, or 18-2, if you can tell on the defensive side they're struggling, I think there's something they're going to need to look at. But as of right now, I'm pretty confident in this team, and I do think they're going to be a top 3 offensive team and maybe even top 10 defensive team. I don't know, that's just me. But yeah, the Phoenix Suns are definitely a team that I will be looking at this entire season, obviously because I'm a fan of them, but also because I'm excited to see how Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, this entire team is going to do. No doubt in my mind, we have to switch over to the Denver Nuggets. They are literally the defending champions. Now, unlike a lot of teams in the NBA, the Denver Nuggets really didn't do much this this offseason. Honestly, I won't lie, it was more of a disappointment from the offseason than actually anything positive, of course, besides the videos of Jokic partying and being with the team and stuff. That shit was pretty funny. But as far as actually losing players, they did lose Bruce Brown to a contract that Indiana offered that I'm not even gonna lie, I don't even know if I would have offered that. Oh, and I almost forgot, but they also did lose Jeff Green. I think Denver is going to be fine for the most part because they still have a pretty good team, and to a lot of people, they still have the best starting five in the NBA. But honestly, what's the old saying? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And honestly, I don't think Denver really needs to go out and make a bunch of these crazy moves. It just wasn't necessary. I do think finding a replacement for Bruce Brown is going to be kind of difficult because he was someone that was very vital to that team. But I do think maybe a guy like Christian Brown, I'm not sure how to say his name, but maybe a guy like him is going to be able to fill that vacant role because Brown honestly had a pretty interesting playoff run. Like, he played pretty well, and I do think a lot of people are going to start paying attention to him a lot more. I'm seeing a lot of these rankings and these, predictions on who's going to win the finals, who's going to be at the top of the seeding, all that stuff. I'm not going to lie, I think people once again are starting to underrate the Nuggets. And I'm going to be honest, why are we doing this to the defending champions? Like, I don't understand this. I think Denver is still a good team, and honestly, if I'm Phoenix, which that's obviously my favorite team, I don't want to play them again in the playoffs. Like, I'd rather play any other team in the Western Conference. I don't want Denver again, bro. But yeah, all I'm saying is just don't underrate Denver. They're still going to be a good team. I don't care what anyone says. The final team we're going to talk about is the Boston Celtics, and their offseason was very interesting. I'm not going to lie, Boston kind of threw themselves late in the offseason where they didn't really need to be, and they got Drew Holiday. They gave up Robert Williams and Malcolm Brogdon, a move that did not make any sense to me and still doesn't to this day. They also did lose Grant Williams, which maybe that wasn't the worst thing in the world. I also forgot to mention this, but they did get Tingus Pingus, someone who is not a terrible guy to have, even though he is kind of getting up there in age. Not to mention, they gave a big ass contract to a guy that can't even dribble with his left hand. So yeah, I think Boston had a pretty good offseason. Now, I'm gonna be honest, there's only one good thing I can talk about this team, and that is their starting lineup. There is a legitimate argument to be made that Boston not only has the most balanced, but the best starting lineup in the NBA. Having Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, that is not a bad duo to have. Not to mention having Tingus Pingus and Al Horford as your big men, that's also not terrible. On top of adding a defensive guard in Drew Holiday who can be a scorer when he needs to be. Honestly, I think that's a pretty good lineup. Also, according to a lot of coaches and reports, I've seen a lot of people say that this is the best lineup and some say team in the NBA overall. I do think this is a good starting lineup, but Boston has so many issues that I don't think I want to say just yet, because now I want to rank these teams. How much of a chance do I think each one of these teams have to win a championship? I don't even know if I said that right. Whatever, we're just going to rank them. In my opinion, I think the Boston Celtics have the fourth best chance to win a championship. Yes, you could argue they have the best starting lineup in the NBA, but it takes like two things for this whole thing to fail. Now, I know some people want me to make jokes like, oh, Jaylen Brown can't dribble with his left hand, which yes, he can't, but in reality, I still feel like Jaylen Brown is a great NBA player. Like last year, I just think he had a bad series. I do think in a playoff situation this upcoming season, he's going to dominate. Same with Jason Tatum, but it is the other guys on this roster that I have issues with. For one, Al Horford is getting up there in age, and so is Tingus Pingus. These guys are very much injury riddled, and I'm not sure they can defend the paint as well as. Also, let's be honest, Drew Holiday is a notorious playoff dropper that I feel like does not get talked about enough. And trust me, Drew Holiday will get his own dedicated video, but I just don't trust him in the playoffs to be a good scorer. And on the defensive side, I expect him to fail like he has for the past couple years. Also, before you guys come for me in the comment section like, oh, Drew Holiday this, Drew Holiday that, just wait for my Drew Holiday video. I promise you it's gonna come out a couple days after this video. Just trust me, okay? But besides that, I hate this team's depth. I think Derek White is a solid player to come off the bench. I'm not gonna lie to you. But Sam Hauser and Wenyen Gabriel, what the fuck are we doing, guys? I will never forget how much everyone came for the throats of the Phoenix Suns when they saw the depth they have. Like, oh my god, this depth is so bad. Like, they try to criticize Utah Watanabe. I think they criticized some of the other guys we picked up. But I'm hearing nothing about Boston's depth. I've heard everyone just go radio silent like this depth is going to do something. Nah, keep that same energy. Who the fuck is Boston going to have coming off the bench? And I know in a playoff situation, you probably only have like 8 guys, maybe 9 guys in the rotation. But I'm sorry, once Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown go to the bench, this team is fucking cooked. Now, don't get me wrong, Boston is probably going to end up with the first seed in the Eastern Conference, maybe second worst case scenario. But I am telling you, come playoff time, I am not confident in this team whatsoever. I do not care what anyone tells you. Do not let people gaslight you into telling you this team is better than they actually are. They're not that fucking good. Be fucking serious. Now, the team I think with the third best odds to win the NBA title is the Phoenix Suns. I know Suns fans are gonna come for my throat, which I don't give a fuck what they think anymore. Look, Phoenix is still a great team, and of course I want them to win, but I think the defensive issues are something I'm still kind of concerned about. I will say it again, I do want to wait until the actual season starts to see what happens, but honestly, that's really the only thing that concerns me. Also, I do notice that guys like Bradley Beal, Kevin Durant, Booker, they've been injury riddled in the past. What happens if one of those guys go down? Is Phoenix going to be okay? Are they going to be able to move forward without them for a while? Honestly, I'm not going to lie, as long as Booker stays healthy, I think this team is still fine no matter what happens. But compared to these next two teams, I'm not going to lie, I don't know how Phoenix is going to stand out versus them. Now, I've thought about 1 and 2 for quite some time. In fact, I've been pondering over it for probably the past 25 minutes. And I'm not going to lie, I do think my opinion is going to flip like every other day, but at number 2, I'm going to go with the defending champion Denver Nuggets. I think Denver has a great team, but I'm not going to lie, with the way they handled the offseason, I do not think they really made enough moves to go with, the Bucks. I know I said they didn't really have to make any moves, and they really didn't, but when Milwaukee got Dame, and now you have to consider they have Giannis, Chris Middleton, Dame, this team is scary, I'm just going to be honest. And I don't know how Denver is going to handle this team. I know a lot of people said, oh, they're going to get beat in the pick and roll, but we saw in every series that is not really what happened, and Jokic was fine in pick and roll situations. But honestly, I don't know how they're going to handle a pick and roll situation with Dame and Giannis. I mean, overall, I don't know how they're going to handle Dame. Giannis himself, I don't even know how they're going to handle him. And then maybe they can find a stop for each of them or try to contain them. What about Chris Middleton? What about the depth? I don't know if Denver can stop this team, but I won't lie, it wouldn't surprise me if we get a Milwaukee-Denver NBA Finals. That is going to be one hell of a matchup. Granted, me personally, with no bias involved, I'd rather see Suns and Bucks rematch, but that's just me. And of course, as it's pretty obvious, I got Milwaukee winning the NBA Finals this year. Now, of course, this is not my final prediction, get it? Because NBA Finals and whatever. Look, this isn't my final prediction. It is way too early. It is not even the start of the season, technically. I mean, we're in preseason, but it's not the regular season. Also, anything can happen. That's what's beautiful about the NBA. But gentlemen, this is my way too early NBA Finals predictions. And if you guys want to see some predictions I actually made earlier on that are way too early, I'm talking about bold predictions, well, check the video on the screen right here.